This conference will now be recorded.
Okay,
Yes.
today is June the 17th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins.
Yes.
John Northrup.
Here.
Blake Tresson. Lane Lewis.
Here.
And President Cox.
Yes. Let's all stand for the pledge, please. Dan Wilkins, help us out. I pledge allegiance
Yes.
to the
To
of the
the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
First item on the agenda, as always, is the public comment. Do we have any public comment, Rochelle?
I do not have any emails, public comment that have been sent to me, and I have not received any prior to the meeting either, unless there is anyone on the line who wishes to speak. I see that there are a couple of guests on the line. If you wish to make a comment, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, we're open for public comment. Anyone? Anyone for public comment? Going once? Going twice? We're moving on. Next item on the agenda is consent agenda items 1 through 5. If everyone has had a chance to review these items and find them in order, we will ask for a motion to approve, and they will be entered into the record and will stand as read. Any questions, comments on the consent agenda items 1 through 5?
I so move.
We have a motion on the floor. Any questions or comments on agenda items 1 through 5? Need a second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Tresson. Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes. Move along to section 4 of the regular agenda. Approval of the organizational chart. This is item 1.
Good morning, President Cox and Directors, Vicki Luthrano, Human Resources Administrator. The last update to the organizational chart was in December of 2019. In order to accurately reflect and account for full-time equivalent staffing, the org chart has been updated. There has been a couple of changes on the organizational chart, and that is the removal of the lead maintenance mechanic classification and the addition of 1 FTE each for the maintenance supervisor and IT specialist classification. Generally and historically, the organizational chart has been brought before the board at the beginning of each fiscal year. And moving forward, we would like to bring the organizational chart to the board only when there are any changes that need to be approved. The request and recommendation management staff of the organizational chart.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
So would this be adding a position the way that
Dan, I'm sorry, I only partially heard you, but I think you're asking if there was a position added to the organizational chart. Is that correct? Not exactly. We had the maintenance supervisor position on the previous organizational chart, but we had just listed that it had a 0 FTE. So we still have the maintenance supervisor on the organizational chart. The difference is that we put a 0 and then a slash and a 1, meaning that there are 0 FTE filling the position, but that there is one position available. So we've had it on our organizational chart historically. We just have now made it a little more clear as to the fact that there's no in the position right now, but we do have that position available. And just as an FYI, we have gone to recruitment process. We're still working on it, but we are in the process of getting a person in this position. And then also to answer the same question, the IT specialist, it was a position that's historically been on the org chart. We're in a recruitment process on that one too. It just hasn't been filled.
So the reason I ask is, you know, we've got this organizational assessment that's underway, and Dave got appointed to a board subcommittee to interface with staff on that effort. And I just want to make sure we're not, it would be an odd time to make organizational changes just before an organizational assessment comes out. And that's what I was trying to get clarity on.
Okay, yes, I understand. And again, just to state, we did already have these on the org chart historically, and so they're not anything brand new at this point.
Okay, is there any further questions or comments in regards to the approval of the organizational chart? Now's the time. Questions, further comments?
No comment.
Seeing none, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So move, make the motion to approve the organizational chart.
Moved by Lewis, need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by who?
Done.
John?
Who? John?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, been moved and seconded. All in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan?
Yes.
John Northrup?
Yes.
Tristan?
Yes.
Lane Lewis?
Yes.
And President Cox?
Yes.
We're all in favor of the organizational chart.
Next item is approve the cost of living adjustment and salary schedule for fiscal year 2020, 2021. Questions or comments?
Good morning again, President Cox and Directors, Vicki Butrano, Human Resources Administrator. Part of Resolution 12-2019, the board approved an annual cost of living or COLA adjustment to be applied to group within the salary schedule. The COLA shall be in accordance with the California Consumer Price Index, all urban consumers, beginning and ending in February of each year, and applied at the beginning of the fiscal year, first full pay period in the fiscal year. As a side note, we recently changed our payroll schedule from a bi-monthly schedule to a bi-weekly schedule. So the first full pay period will commence July 5th, 2020. Resolution 12-2019 allowed for the agency to calculate a CPI per the attached calculation. As the CPI posted exactly 3.0%, the calculation is 3% at 100%, which is 3%. Resolution 2012-2019 gave some employees the option to move from Group A to Group B within the salary schedule, and that was a voluntary move. Several employees have chosen this option, thereby taking pay reductions in anticipation of receiving future COLAs by being in Group B. Separately, regarding the salary schedule, it should be noted that various classifications only within Group A have been removed from the salary schedule, and the reasons being that the classification either no longer exists, they're currently not occupied by staff, or the Group B salary exceeds Group A. And you will note on the salary schedule that it is now an hourly schedule, and that it goes out to 4 decimal places. And the reasoning for the 4 decimal places is that it matches our new accounting software, thereby making it less confusing for employees to see their rate at a 4 decimal places. Therefore, the salary schedule matches. The recommendation is that management and staff recommend approval of the cost of living adjustment and salary schedule for 2020-2021.
Any questions, comments? Anyone?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
At Alpine Springs, apparently it started out at 3 and it was reduced to 1%. So that's what we passed on our board. So I wonder if they're using just different figures than we are.
Director Northrup, we are using the California Consumer Price Index All Urban Consumers, and it begins February of 19 through February of 2020, and that posted at exactly 3.0%. So possibly it is a different version of CPI that you guys are using. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Go ahead, Blake.
It's not a question, it's just a comment that that we just happened to decide to utilize the February on February data for the CPI. And of course, the economic consequences of COVID weren't recognized until March and have continued to depress CPI values through March, April, and May, but none of that is reflected on the April or the February on February. And so the 3% COLA, which I think is appropriate based on the resolution we passed, is higher than it would be if we were using a March on March or April on April or May on May CPI value. But what's going to happen, and staff should be aware of this, is because we use February on February, next year when it comes time for the COLA adjustment, they're going to see the consequences likely of the COVID impact. And so the 3% this year is, who knows what the economy is going to do and where CPI is going to go, but currently many of the CPI year-on-year numbers are at a fraction of 1%. And so it's just staff should acknowledge that their 3% this year, despite all this COVID stuff, doesn't reflect any of the impacts of the COVID pandemic, but it will be reflected in next year's February on February data. It was just a comment and important for staff so that expectations are accurate. I mean, if the economy rebounds some, it's still going to incorporate that COVID impact. So that's it. And I would be glad to make a motion for the approval of a 3% cost of living adjustment as recommended by staff.
Any
Second.
other questions or comments before I ask for a second?
Yes, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Lane.
I think the employees, based, Blake, on what you just said, it's very beneficial to the employees for this year as opposed to next year's lowering because it compounds every year. So I think, we agreed that this was the time period and the CPI index. And I think the employees should look very favorably on this. And even next year when it goes down, it doesn't matter. It compounds on top of that. That 3% compounds on top of next year, whatever next year's is. So it's extremely beneficial to our employees.
Okay, thanks, Lane. Any other comment before I ask for a second?
Second.
Dan seconds. All in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
All motion approved for the approval of cost of living adjustment and salary schedule for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Next item, item 3, is the approval of the what is it? Hammer Schneider Incorporated Letters of Engagement for the annual financial audit of the fiscal year 2019-2020.
Good morning, members of the board. Rochelle Chavez, Administrative Manager. This is for the approval of the DeMoore, Hamrick, and Schneider letters of engagement for the annual financial audit of fiscal year 1920. And as usual, this is our annual audit approval. And I know previously there has been discussion about changing lead auditors. And as you know, this year we transitioned our accounting software from IBM AS400 to Cassell. And I think it would be in our best interest to continue with DeMoore, Hamrick, and Schneider through this transition period to keep the same auditors so they would be able to find any challenges we're facing during this time. So with that being said, this year the physical impact is an increase of fees from $29,000 to $32,000. In addition to the regular financial audit, they also perform the annual financial audit of the appropriation limit review. If there are not any other questions, staff recommends approval.
I have a comment.
Sure.
Go ahead, Lane.
As you know, I mean, I've been on this for every year, supporting another set of eyes looking at our books, and I'm not going to change. I believe it's beneficial to have another outfit take a look and see what DeMoore Hamrick, based on they've been with us for what, 20 years. Let's get another pair of eyes on this thing. That's my comment. I know the Cassell software is new, but I don't think that's a limiting factor.
So
Dan?
Lane, are you suggesting that we not approve this and we find a different auditor for this next cycle, or that we stick with DeMoore Hamrick for this cycle and provide staff with direction to find someone else for the next cycle?
Well, as I said last year, it was the same thing. I've been on it trying to get a new set of eyes. If you feel it's more beneficial to keep this group on, then that's your prerogative. I think it's a time that one of these days we need to change. And as far as a different set of eyes on this, and I believe it's a proactive way of taking another look at our business model and how we're doing business.
Go ahead, LaRue.
Lane, thank you for your comment. Michelle and her staff and I, we did have a discussion about that. The intent was to do that this year, but like Michelle said, due to the transfer over to the new software, we really did think it would be less problematic to maintain the current financial officers. However, we do fully intend next year to get an RFP and see if we can entertain other auditors. So we do agree with your position. We just thought it'd be more beneficial this year simply because of the transition. But again, the intent next year is to do as your.
Okay. I'll be consistent.
Heard loud and clear, and we will just put out an RFP to find other auditors. I know there are similar districts within our member districts who have done the same and have also used the same services before that have also reached out. So we fully intend to do so. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments on item number 3? Approval of the letter of engagement.
I'd move approval.
I'll second.
By Wilkins,
I'll second.
seconded by Northrup. Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Trisson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
No, for reasons stated earlier.
President Cox.
Yes.
And motion approved for the approval of Demore, Hamrick, and Schneider letters of engagement for the annual financial audit of fiscal year 2019-2020.
See, this also counts with, since this is for last year, not this coming year, so that would make sense.
Yeah, it was for last year. So this year for 2021, we can do an RFP to have another company for that audit.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. Item 4, approve annual budget for fiscal year 2020-21.
I so move.
Okay,
All
any
right.
comments? We have a motion on the floor to approve from Director Northrup.
LaRue, did you have any a presentation or discussion prior to moving for action?
Yes, before we have action, I think it'd be good to review them. Rochelle is going to take the lead on it. Her and I have discussed it. We have kind of taken the approach that she will touch the tables briefly, with the expectation that if there's any questions, the board of directors will address it at that time. That way we don't take too long on it. So Rochelle will proceed with them with the assumption that you guys have reviewed a lot of the data. Please feel free to raise your hand or give some notification if you have any questions. Other than that, she will kind of get this through with the hopes of 10 to 15 minutes. But of course, we will go ahead and move as requested. So with that, Rochelle, please proceed, and I'll provide support as needed.
Okay, gentlemen of the board, Rochelle Chavez, Administrative Manager, and we have before you the approval of the annual budget for fiscal year 2020-2021. And with the motion on the floor, I thought I was out of the woods and I wouldn't have to go through my presentation. I thought all that work and I'm done. So excuse me for my nervousness, but it is a lot of work that was put into this, a lot of late nights. So I appreciate you guys giving me feedback. But going through this here, it is a revised budget from what you've seen in previous years, the evolution of the budget we've seen previously. So taking what you saw last month, that was just the table structure. We took your comments and updated all the data that you saw before, has been updated, the tables are updated, and there is definitely narrative put in as well. So we have a table of contents, table index, and also an appendix that has the full detail of the general fund budget expenditure summary, which is more of what Blake was looking for the macro details for each department. But at the beginning, we have the introduction and the fund descriptions for all funds. And you can see that it does show Fund 0, 00, and 01. And it shows for fiscal year 1920 for both of those funds. What we've done is what we talked about previously was the combination of those two funds into the general fund, and that will be Fund 10. So we're combining those two funds into Fund 10 moving forward. Now, these funds are going to remain open because there's bank accounts associated with those funds, and it's a little more difficult to close those funds when we have so many active programs wrapped up in them, our lockbox and payroll and such. So they are still showing open here. Fund 2 is our wastewater capital reserve fund. Fund 4 is, Fund 2, wastewater capital reserve fund, and Fund 4 is the state revolving fund. That was for the SRF loan, and we are proposing to extinguish that fund because it's no longer a requirement now that we have done the wastewater revenue refunding bonds. That is no longer a requirement, so we can extinguish that fund and transfer the funds or the monies into a new fund, and that will be the rate stabilization fund. Okay. Fund 6, placement rehab, those you've seen before, 6 and 7. Fund 8, I previously just mentioned, the rate stabilization fund. The rate stabilization fund is also a new fund. It's going to be created to insulate ratepayers from large abrupt increases in service. And Fund 9 is an unrestricted reserve fund, general fund that we discussed. Just going through this quickly, does anyone have questions regarding funds?
I have a question.
Sure.
On the rate stabilization fund, you're showing it fund interest at 73,000. What is the actual amount transferred to the rate stabilization fund?
So that amount, the 73,000, is actually just the interest earned. So it's not a revenue account. It's the interest earned from the SRF loan account. I'm sorry, not the SRF. It's the interest earned, and I'm going to go to another table here that actually shows me the amounts. So it's the interest earned that is transferred, yes, from the rate stabilization fund. So with the extinguishing of the rate stabilization fund, those monies are transferred, or not transferred, the account is closed, and those monies are taken and put into the rate stabilization fund account. So because it's not a revenue account, the money is just sitting in there accruing interest. And so that's the same, it's the same ideal. So it's sitting, the money is sitting in there, and that's the income that it's making is only on interest earned.
So with the state, with the SRF fund, okay, we had to have that assurance as far as a rate stabilization in there. That money was directly transferred into this new account.
Right.
And that amount is what?
From the rate,
You referenced table 23, Michelle?
yes. So that amount is $3,158,394.
That's what I thought, because that's what we originally agreed to back when we paid off the SRF fund.
Right.
Okay, good.
So the 70,000 is just the interest earned, but
Okay.
the 3,158,000 is the total balance of the account.
Okay, good,
So it
thank you.
doesn't have any other revenue. Okay, Blake, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Rochelle. And I can see you guys put a lot of work into this, and the narrative is really nice. My question is, our main revenue sources are property taxes and the user fees, which go into our new Fund 10.
Right.
And then connection fees, which go into Fund 2. And from what I could read, at the end of the year, anything above $300,000 in our Fund 10 is transferred to Fund 6. And so I'm wondering how do monies get into the unrestricted reserve fund, Fund 9? It doesn't have a revenue source, and there doesn't appear to be a clear means of transfer of funds to there from another fund that has a revenue source.
So that is what is going to change with the new fund, policy. We're going to change how the balances are transferred and at what amounts they're transferred. So at what percentages they're transferred to each fund so that they are spread out. So with the approval of these budgets, next month we'll come back to the board with the fund policy that will go into more depth and detail on how we plan to do that to appropriately spend those monies.
Thank you.
Any further questions on funds? Okay, moving forward with the 1920 budget review. As you can see, these budget review tables are updated. The values before you are updated for the 1920 budgets, the projected actuals through year end 1920, and the budget versus projected actuals. We have the revenue, expenditures, and net income for the admin department, operations and maintenance, wastewater capital reserve fund, replacement, rehabilitation, and upgrade. And just on the admin fund review table, you could see that in ad valorem, we received.
Rochelle?
Yes.
It would be helpful if you'd reference the table number, just because there's
Table
multiple tables.
So those are all the tables. I just read them out as to what are in this section, but I'm at table 1. Table 1, the revenue is ad valorem, and the budget to projected actuals, we budgeted 100, the budget versus projected actuals, we budgeted 103.7% to projected actuals. You see that column? So our actual net income, our total expenditures, our budget was 3.1 million, and we budgeted 110.11% So our net income ended up being 84% of. Go ahead, Blake. Looks like you have a question.
No, I'm just gonna ask Lane to mute his, there's a bunch of static. I see his
Okay.
camera going on.
Okay. So our net income, we budgeted 84% to actual. So we made more than we budgeted. So our expenses were actually less than we projected them to be. Go ahead, Blake.
The numbers are all great, and I'm, I want to, at the end of the day, adopt a budget, but I just make a comment that, in future years, the percentages, the way you ran the percentages are not the way I'm used to reading stuff. Usually you see actuals as a percentage of budget. So when you see a percent there, you're looking at how much was spent relative to the budget. And so something less than 100% quickly is, well, we didn't spend as much, as opposed to budget compared to actuals. And that kind of, the percent numbers throughout the document, next year, maybe we can sit down and look at those. They're just, I've struggled throughout the document.
Okay.
The numbers are correct. It's just the way they're represented is not consistent with the way I'm used to looking at it and getting value out of it.
So you would
Thanks.
prefer them in reverse?
Yeah, and then it gets more complicated as we get into tables 5 through and beyond, where you've got multiple percentages going on those as well. But the actual numbers and the percentages, the way you calculate it, are all accurate.
Okay, thank you. We could do that. Not a problem. So this table is all the same for the 1920 budget review for all departments, from table 1, table 2, and tables 3 and 4. So they're all the same for 1 and 2. Actually, 3 and 4 are smaller because those are capital projects. So they're smaller because there's no revenues reported in these. These are just for projects for reference. Does anyone have any questions on those tables? Okay. Moving forward to fiscal year 2021 budgets. At the beginning of this, on page 11, there's just kind of a summary of what we intend to do with those funds that we talked about previously. So Fund 0 and 01 are merging to Fund 10. Fund 2 will be maintained. Fund 4 will be extinguished, or we're proposing to extinguish. Fund 6 and 7 will maintained, and Funds 8, 9, and 10 will be new funds. Okay, moving forward to Table 5. These are the fund, Table 5 is a fund revenue summary. And you will see here, this includes all the funds in one table summary, so you can review all of the revenue accounts. Starting with general fund, it shows the 1920 budget, the 1920 projected actuals, the budget versus projected actuals, the 2021 budget, the 1920 budget versus 2021 budget, and the 2021 budget versus the 1920 projected actuals. So, any questions about Table 5?
On Table 5, does that take into account the what we're going to discuss later today, as far as the rebate back to our commercial customers, as far as that revenue?
It does not. It does not. No. Okay, so any other questions on Table 5? No? Okay. Table 6 is general fund revenue. So this is strictly for table 10. If you reference back up to from table 6 to table 5, you will see that the total revenue in table 6 reconciles back to the total revenue for general fund under the 1920 budget line. And the same holds true to the tables going further down. So moving on to page 13, you can see we just went through the total funds. We're not going by department as previous budgets were for all departments. The appendix does that and gives you all the detail by GL. Go ahead, Blake.
Just going back to table 6 on the general fund revenue detail.
Yes.
You know, obviously the two big sources of revenue for the agency are sewer service charges and the property taxes.
Correct.
And it looks like on the sewer service charges, you're projecting a 3% increase in sewer service charges for 2021 versus projected actuals for 1920. And I'm just wondering, you know, the thought process there. That seems like an awfully large increase with no rate increase associated. So the rates are the same. So you're talking about a 3% increase in overall number of customers for the coming year. And I know that TSD is the member agency with the most development going on. And I think we're projecting closer to a 1% increase in our service charges for the year, just in the increased customers. So I don't know, you know, was there thought, or what was the thought put in behind a 3% increase in sewer service charges?
Well, we had a lot of permits that were, you know, deposits were paid for permits that were not activated. That would also account for why our projected actuals did not come through for the current year. We expect some of those connections to be activated in the following, and then the additional activations as well. So, you know, it's just a delayed activation plus the new accounts. And that holds true for commercial and residential. We've also, with we've been doing account conversions for some of our commercial accounts with the whole, mine's going blank here, but with the HDR study that we did with the connection fees, we had to go back and revisit some commercial accounts. And so we've been adjusting some commercial accounts. Some have gone down and some have gone up. And keeping that in mind, I'm pretty confident that we will be able to reach that 12.8.
Okay, thank you. It seems optimistic, but that's great. And then it looked like for the property taxes, almost a 4% rise in the ad valorem taxes, which sounds like a good number. Just commenting on those big revenue sources for the agency.
Yes, very good.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay. Moving forward, so these are same tables for expenditures here. I'm sorry, with revenues. And you'll see that I want to just point out table 7. You'll see that there is a negative number in other revenue. I just wanted to point out that that is for connection fees that are paid out on deposit. There are connection or commercial accounts that pay deposits for their connection fees. And when we refund them, just to have separation, so for tracking purposes, when we refund them their deposits, we pay them or we pay it out of this account just strictly for tracking purposes. So, you know, out of thought, you could pay it back out of the sewer connection fees, but you know, it could be, we just do it for tracking. So that's all it is. It's connection fee deposit refunds. That's it. Okay. Moving forward, that's it for revenue. Any questions on revenues? Go ahead.
You'd indicated that, you know, some of the disparity you saw in actuals versus budget were for the returns on our fund interest because of lower interest rates.
Yes.
During the last year
Yes.
versus what you projected. What interest rate did you guys, assumption did you use from LAIF for the coming year?
So for the coming year, I went with a 1%, 1.5%. And previously we had went with the 2.2. And this year, right now, we're on an average of 2. We're on an average of 2%. And 18 and 19, it was 2.2. 17, 18, it was 1.3. So we had budgeted, you know, higher numbers last year. And that was the big discrepancy with the budget versus actual. You know, with that much money sitting in the bank, you wouldn't think it'd be that different. But when we're talking millions of dollars, even though it's only 0.25%, it makes a big difference. So, sorry, I want to.
So you're going with 1.5% for,
Yeah.
on average over the coming year for our return on interest in LAIF. Okay.
It
Thank you,
seems to be
Rochelle.
on a continued decline. Okay, so moving forward, we have the general fund expenditures. And we, same as before, this is the general fund for all inclusive. Same structure as before with the budget projected actuals for the current year. Versus projected actuals. And then the 2021 budget, last year's budget or current year budget versus 2021 budget, and 2021 budget versus projected actuals. And we use the same format for the other accounts as well. Same table, same structure format, because these are our general descriptions or general ledger accounts structure for everyone. So we use the same format going forward. And anybody have questions regarding the expenditures? Go ahead.
What assumption, did you use the 3% COLA assumption in the creation of the budget?
For our salaries, we did. We used
You assumed a 3%.
We used our COLAs and then also our step increases as well.
Can I ask what you used for increase in the benefit package?
We do not, at this point in June, we do not have the increases for
Healthcare?
healthcare because it doesn't come out until October. So we assume a 3% increase.
Good, thank you.
Just actually, CalPERS came out yesterday with their preliminary changes in their premiums for their health benefits.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's a little more than 3%. That's not so wonderful. It ranges from probably 7 to 15%, depending on what program you subscribe to.
Okay. Yeah, it would have been great to have that information last week.
Yeah, it didn't come out till yesterday.
Okay. We'll take a look at that. And Going forward,
Rochelle, just a follow-up question on these expenditure tables. You have a statement in here. It should be noted that the differences in the benefits to the salaries, they're not consistent. One would expect parallel changes, and it's just it is interesting the way they track by department so differently, with sometimes salaries and wages increasing greater than the benefits, and in other departments benefits increasing significantly more than the rate that the salaries increased. And it sounded like it'd be kind of consistent in one way, maybe because you said the conservative estimate for health benefits and insurance, that we were going to see benefits in general go up more than the rate at which salary went up, but it really fluctuates dramatically depending on the department. I don't know whether you can share a little bit of.
sure. Which table is that specifically?
Well, I think it's in tables 12 through 16. You mentioned in table, I think 11.
Yeah.
Or it should be noted in table 12, the large monetary differences between benefits, and so in 12, you see salaries went up 12%, but benefits only went up 4%.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Then you jump to the engineering department and salaries go up 6%, but benefits, flip-flop, and now they're going up 13%. And then you get to IT, where salaries go up 40%, but benefits only go up 7%.
Actually, it works out
so,
for the reason we just talked about, because when we put the budgets together, we don't have those healthcare costs, and so we budgeted higher. So we budgeted higher numbers, and when the numbers came out, so we have conservative estimates on those numbers. And actually, for the instance of table 12 and specifically, let's see, for the admin department, not so much engineering, but for IT and maintenance. I know that they had budgeted on replacing staff and did not have the time to actually interview and replace staff. So had they actually had the time to hire someone, it would have been closer to actual budget. So the numbers would have been closer to salary and closer to budgeted healthcare costs with another body or staff member in those positions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess you're reflecting on the projected actuals for last year versus budget for last year, but I was more talking about the increase of or upcoming year's budget versus actuals. And I'm wondering if the difference has to do with, staffing changes where you're departments where you're hiring people and they're anticipated to be a PEPRA employee, you're seeing a significant increase in salary, but not a commensurate increase in benefits because that PEPRA employee is not receiving the classic pension benefits.
That is correct.
Whereas departments where you have primary no change, you're not seeing a discrepancy there. Or if there's an anticipated hiring of I guess a classic employee, you'd see higher benefit costs with them.
That would be correct. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Moving forward to wastewater fund expenditures, you will see for wastewater fund expenditures, we have the product descriptions and the 5-year plan for these projects. And below is a list of those projects and what that includes. The same is listed for the replacement and rehab fund on table 18, and a 5-year plan, project total, and a listing of those projects. I did, let's see here. I did find, let's see, no, that'll be later. And of course, there is a master plan coming up that could change the direction of these projects, but we can cross that bridge when we get to it. It's always the will of the board. Okay. And moving forward to page 21, fund summaries. Page 22 is table 19, general fund summaries. Now this would be the overall general fund summaries for revenues, expenditures, and net position. So it'll show all of those additional descriptions for budget, projected actuals, budget versus projected actuals, 2021 budget, and 1920 budget change versus 2021 budget, percent change. Any questions on the general fund summary? Okay.
No questions.
Okay. Moving forward, the same table layout for the wastewater capital reserve fund summary. Now this one is set up a little different. There is no expenditures for previous comparison because they're projects and they change from year to year. We left that out, but it does show the revenues that we budgeted. And so we'll just start tracking this going forward. That will change. And page 24 for table 21. This is for the replacement, rehab, and upgrade fund summary. I did find an error on the print copy that was not reflected the same actual data that was in our Excel sheet. So at the bottom, the actual debt payment on the 2020 wastewater refunding bond for 26.8%, that total is incorrect. So this data is reflected on other sheets with different numbers, and you'll see the correct numbers on the final table of the summary sheets, and we will substitute it with the correct table on the final document. And the total amount for that cell for the 2021 budget amount is $813,658. The total expenditures is $3,198,658, and the net position is $2,888,658. And this information is reflected on the final sheet, page 26, on table 23. Page 25 is our unfunded accrued liability. Now this is also coming up later in our board discussion. As you know, we participate in the CalPERS UAL, and previous board discussion and direction was to have a 5-year plan to pay down our UAL. And on our 5-year plan, you'll see before you a table in the table 22 that is our schedule for the next 5 years. And the total annual payment is true to previous years and the total payments that were agreed to. Now, what is updated on this table is the annual scheduled payment. This year, the 2021 annual scheduled payment has decreased because of our previous additional discretionary payment of $3,535,000. I'm sorry, of our previous additional discretionary payment of $2,510,895. Our annual scheduled payment is $445. So with our principal payment decreasing, I applied that additional payment, or with our interest decreasing, I applied the additional principal payment to the additional annual payment, thereby increasing that amount to $2.6 million. You had a question, Blake?
Rochelle, that makes sense. Thanks for capturing the savings in our annual required contribution amounts. I guess my comment on these UL payments is, from a budget perspective, is I understand the mechanics of why you guys are making these payments out of our replacement rehabilitation fund, but it doesn't really make sense to me that that's where, someone looking at our budget and our costs should find something that's clearly a employee benefit, but yet, a significant payment of, $3.5 million towards pension looks like it's coming out of our, asset replacement and rehabilitation upgrade fund. I think that accurately should be coming out of either Fund 10, the general fund, or create another fund if you need to handle this. But to show that as a coming out of that fund, it doesn't seem accurate to me. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but
Okay. I can give you my my auditor explanation based on their explanation of why we have always done this. Because coming here, that was new to me as well. What they have explained is the reason it's done that way. So first, every year, the additional surplus monies from Fund 0, Fund 1, soon to be Fund 10, the surplus funds are transferred to Fund 6. So even though Fund 6, the title that it has, it makes it seem as though, being a, it makes it seem as though because it's a capital improvement fund that it's restricted. It is in fact unrestricted. So those funds, we can use them for other purposes. So the funds are transferred from 0001 to 06. So that's just the funds that are used to start with. But the liability itself, the UAL, when it was first created, or the expense itself evolved, it was expensed on our books many years ago, is what I was told. So on our financial statements, it was expensed previously. So we can't expense it twice. You can only expense it once. So we have to, even though we're paying it, we've already counted it as an expense. So we can't double dip. It's a liability. So we're paying down the liability kind of like a loan, like the SRF loan. We're paying the interest on that loan, the principal and interest, but you can't double dip. Does that make, am I making sense?
I'm not really following the double dipping. It just seems like if we budgeted for these payments to our pension plan, then we don't need to transfer the funds. They're in the budget, so they need to be part of the Fund 10 budget, and they wouldn't be part of the excess that would go into the replacement, rehabilitation, upgrade fund and then withdrawn from them. They'd be budgeted into Fund 10. These seem to be Fund 10 expenditures. So,
But it's not an expenditure, it's a liability because we've already expensed it. So it's on our balance sheet. So it's a liability accrual accounting thing that happens in the background because it's already been expensed. It's not an expense, it's a liability. I know it sounds confusing. I wish I had a way to explain it to you. And I can work on trying to do that for you since we plan to have the auditors here. I just know that's the accounting function of it. The way I can explain it is it's like the SRF loan. So if you looked at what I was explaining on table 21, I think it was 21, just how we show the debt payment to the wastewater revenue refunding bond for the
Rochelle?
replacement rehab. Sorry.
I think this is I think it's a little bit of a fine point. The money's being expended, and maybe we can talk with the auditor about, how you're doing it. But yeah, I don't want to take up any more of the board's time on this. Just that's my comment, and maybe we can talk about it unless the rest of the board. And I'm not hearing anybody else chiming in, so it's just my own
Lane had a question.
If I may, great point, Blake. I understand the confusion because it does come from Fund 6. That's really based on the fact that at the end of fiscal year, based on Fund 0001, there's a preset amount that has to be distributed over. Now that we're hearing exactly, we've heard this, but with the fund policy that we're proposing next month, what we can do is amend that policy to make sure that the monies that are transferred over from 6 are higher values. So when we do assign those UAL payments or larger payments, we can make sure they maintain in Fund 10 as a general fund, which may provide some clarity. If that's something you guys would like to do, we could write the fund policy to do that. But the way it's presented right now is because our current Fund 0001 require us to transfer those monies over. And there, I think that's where the confusion comes, because we should be pulling it from Fund 0001, or pulling it out of 6. And it's because of the restrictions of it. But I think if moving forward for our fund policy for next month, we have a larger balance. So in our Fund 10, an operating balance, and then that'll be able to eliminate that confusion. If you guys think that would be some direction and discussion, we're more than willing to address that as well. Sound good?
Okay. Okay. All right. Lane, does that answer your question?
Yeah, just where we're looking at it, showing the reduction of the UAL overall from year to year. Where do I see that?
That is not shown on this table. We're expecting an updated valuation from CalPERS in September. And when I see that, I can bring it to you for an update.
Okay, great. If we're taking down a couple million to 3 million a year on this, it was 15 million when we started, and the 5-year plan will take it down to,
I think it might have been 17 and it's 15.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
We're making progress. Okay, so finally, we have the projected end of year fund balances. And so it shows all of the funds across the top for the description. General fund, wastewater capital reserve fund, state revolving, upgrade and rehab replacement fund, emergency, state revolving, and unrestricted reserve. And it shows the beginning balance, the revenue received, expenditures, the UAL is also included there on its own line, so you can see that. And now, and that expenditure for the upgrade and rehab, that is a correct amount, just so you're aware. That amount is correct. And then the CalPERS UAL ending balance. So those are the proposed ending balances for a total agency balance of 38.7 million.
Rochelle,
Yes.
this is Blake. I guess the one row that I think would be helpful in this table, and again, maybe, I don't know that it's mandatory for this year, but just while we have it in front of us,
Sure.
would be transfers, interfund transfers shown here, because you've indicated that at the end of the year, the balance in the general fund is going to be 300,000. And so that bottom line there is showing the ending balance to be 2.5 million, but really it's going to be 300,000 because 2.2 million is going to be transferred to a different fund. And this would help us see how those funds move around within the agency. And so they're
Sure, we can do that. As these funds evolve, you know, this can be fluid, so we can change it and make it evolve to be what it is that you wanted to see. You know, I can say, and I hope you agree that this is definitely an improvement from what we've seen in previous years, and we can always make it better. We can always make it better. So whatever improvements you want to see, let us know, and we'll make it.
The number of comments are just because you've given us so much more information, and I do really appreciate that. And I don't mean to, hopefully you're not walking away feeling by any means, haven't done, you know, a really outstanding job of improving the budget. So just want to make that clear.
Not a problem. That's what I'm here for, and it just helps me learn too. And so that is it until you get to the appendix. And this is the macro details without looking at the actual invoices. This is the macro details down to the GL code for every department and every GL code. And these balances match back for the total expenditures of each department.
And thanks for putting this in. It's really nice to see the granularity of the budget. I did have one question. Now that I see this level of detail, you've got a line item under the employee benefits, 1008 retiree health insurance that the district intends to, the agency intends to spend $665,000 on its retiree health premiums. I'm just wondering what the funding status of the agency's CERP fund is. I thought we were above 100%, and does that $665,000 in expenditures, is that a fraction of our actual premiums and we're making some disbursements from CERP, or are we making any additional contributions to CERP? How does the flow of funds in and out of the CERP account, which is supposed to help offset these retiree health premiums, how is that addressed for the coming budget year?
We have not utilized the CERP trust at all. We are paying monthly as we go from our operating funds, not touching the money in the trust. We're leaving it in the trust.
Am I accurate in that the agency is more than 100% funded though at this time in the CERP?
The last valuation that I received, we were just under 100%. But actually during our board meeting today, Michelle had a webinar with them to receive an update. So I will have more information later today.
So, and does the agency have a kind of a plan for, I mean, I assume we probably have, you know, I don't know how many $1 million in the CERT. At what point do you start making disbursements from that to offset these retiree health costs?
I know at the time of our last valuation, we had, I would say it did not, I don't want to pull just quote numbers without being accurate, but I know that it didn't reflect recent retirees. And we did have 3 retirees in the last 3 or 6 months. So I know that hasn't been an update, but we had not anticipated using any of those funds. So as we use them, with it being $500,000 a year, you know, draining $500,000 a year, if we don't have to, you know, saving those funds for the future, you know, that's I think that's important as well, because classic employees are the most expensive to the agency. Well, I mean, that's not SEPT, that's CERT, but I mean, healthcare is a very expensive cost to the agency. And if we don't have to touch those funds, I'd rather we didn't, because that's going to be long-term a very expensive cost.
I guess I would ask at some point in the future, maybe this should be under director's comments, that we develop a kind of a policy for contributions and distributions from the CERT. I understand it's, you know, it's good to hold on to it, but there's got to be, you know, at what point do we pull from that fund? Right? The agency's probably put, I'm guessing, close to $10 million has $10 million sitting in CERT for a purpose of offsetting these costs. So we don't want to end up, if you don't expend it, you're going to end up with potentially more funds than you can expend. So
we could, you know, that's definitely something we could come back and talk about. I can bring that information back to you all again, and we can talk about that. I know we have a lot of stuff coming up, but we can sidebar that conversation, the two of us, and talk about a later date. We can bring it back. Okay. Are there any further questions? Okay. With the only update that I have is that that one correction to table 21, that I will substitute the updated debt payment, total expenditure, and net position for those 3 totals on that page. Other than that, I recommend approval of the 2021 budgets.
Wow, Rochelle, that was a very detailed presentation. Blake, you sure are a numbers man there, Bubba.
It was a lot of work.
I just finished doing the.
You've got a lot more staying power than your old pal Dale, but I'm putting a lot of confidence in Rochelle's due diligence on making sure that we have an adequate accounting and an adequate representation of our different accounts. And with all that being said, we've had not a whole lot of comments from the rest of the directors. But at this time, do we have any guests that are online with us that would like to have any comment? Guests out there? Is there any way of knowing? Rochelle?
Yeah, I just see that they're guests. That's all I know. If they choose not to comment, that's all I can do.
So you say that we do have someone online that are participating?
Yeah, there are a few guests. I see
I
3.
want to make sure that if the guests have any contributions to the previous 1 hour discussion on the budget, that they have an opportunity to express themselves. Now is the time. Anyone? Okay, we had a motion on the floor from John Northrup to approve the 2021 budget.
I'll
Blake?
second it.
And it's a second from Blake. All in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup. John Northrup. John?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes. Let's move along to issue number 5, the approval of resolution 3-2020 to revise the wastewater capital reserve fund budget, making relative findings.
Hello, gentlemen of the board. It is Rochelle Chavez, Administrative Manager, and I'm requesting approval for Resolution 3-2020 to revise the wastewater capital reserve fund budget. And this is just a standard agency process to provide a summary of how we spend our monies. You will see the last page following the resolution is the same table that was provided in the budgets, the 5-year plan for the wastewater capital reserve fund and how the agency intends to spend those monies. And as always, of course, the board will have the authority to make changes should the sewer plan, master sewer plan change that. Go ahead, Dan, you have some questions?
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just curious why we need to do this as a separate item as opposed to just doing this as a part of the budget.
It's just to provide a summary. It's just a good practice to have it in a resolution that we have approval from the board to spend the money on these projects.
Yeah, in my experience, that's what the budget does. So it seems duplicative to me.
Dick, do you have any?
I'll make the motion for approval of resolution 3-2020.
Okay.
Okay, we have the motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion before I ask for a second?
I'll
Sure.
second.
Okay, hang on, Dale. Dick was going to make a comment really quick.
Yes.
I just wanted to respond briefly to Director Wilkins. This resolution also is advisable because it helps the agency demonstrate compliance with certain government code procedures about making annual findings about what it's doing with monies in its reserve funds generated from connection charges.
Okay. Right.
Okay. We
So we
have
have
a motion on the floor from Director Lewis. And if there's no further discussion, I'll ask for a second.
we have a second from Director Northrup.
Yes.
Director Northrup seconds. All in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion
Next item.
for approval of resolution to revise water capital reserve fund budget.
Next item is item 6. Approval of resolution 4-2020 to establish appropriation limits for fiscal year 2021.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been approved by Wilkins, seconded by Lewis. No further discussion, questions, or comments? Seeing none and hearing none.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item 7. Approval of Resolution 5-2020, extinguishing the state revolving fund loan reserve fund and transferring the money to the rate stabilization fund. This
Move approval?
Second.
been approved by Wilkins, seconded by Lewis. No further discussion, questions, or comments? This is the way I like to see it. So keep it up.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item 8, approval of the additional discretionary payments for the agency unfunded accrual liability. Discussion.
Okay,
I'll
so we are,
make the motion for approval here of this.
I'll second.
It's, my
Any
question is, it's
in there?
unclear.
Go ahead, Blake.
It's unclear to me what action we're actually taking. It doesn't define a actual additional discretionary payment amount or a timing of that payment. It has documentation on what our annual required contribution is, and I recommend we do that annual prepayment option, but that's separate from the action, which is the additional discretionary payment, and it does not define in the motion that amount or the timing of it.
okay, my apologies. So I am recommending or requesting to approve the additional discretionary payment of $2,635,532. That is the amount that is reflected on page 25 of the budget for year 2021 of table 22. So it's table 22, page 25. It's the second year of our 5-year plan. And it's, I'll read that again, it's $2,635,532 is the additional discretionary payment. The regular payment will be $981,445 for a total payment this year of $3,616,977 to CalPERS.
I don't, on here, explain how the 11 point, what's the total 11.4? Is that over how many years savings is that?
That will be over the 30 years. We will have, by paying down over these 5 years, the $15 million, we will have saved $11 million over the 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead,
So
Blake.
question. So thank you, Rochelle, for clarifying the staff's recommendation on the amount of the payment. The second half of it had to do with the timing of that payment. When does, and I'm asking that because we at TSD look to make a additional discretionary payment in April and discovered that if you make a payment in a year, the way CalPERS pools funds, it's not like when you invest it, it becomes valued at the market at that date. And if the investment goes up past that date, that you accrue that value. If we had invested in April and the market had increased from April through the end of the fiscal year, we still would have seen on that investment the losses that the whole pool had seen over the entire fiscal year. So it's actually really important, the timing of your investments in the CalPERS pension. And because of that, we didn't make our additional discretionary payment, and we ended up passing a resolution to join the SEPT program, which is similar to our SERP Retiree Health Program Trust Fund, and put the monies into that. And so I don't disapprove of us putting the quantity of money that you recommended or that staff is recommending against our pension liability. I just think it's important that we time it appropriately, and that I think that we should also look at coming back to the board with the ability to invest funds in the SEPT program as well, as part of our having a more integrated investment strategy for our pension liability. So I know that we're already at June 17th, and that you probably, even if we directed to make this payment, it wouldn't happen between now and July 1. But if it did, for some reason, if we didn't specify that and your staff was ready to go, we would be buying into a losing year, and we'd immediately take $2.5 million and see a large liability on that, as opposed to investing it after July 1. So it's important to do that. And so I guess, I would perhaps modify this motion. My recommendation would be that and I'm always a believer in moderation in all things, is that we make half of the ADP to our PERS pension plan after July 1, and that the remaining half we have directed to be put against our pension liability, but that staff bring back information to the board on the SEPT program for a possible contribution to SEPT, or possibly back into the PERS plan at that point, that we withhold the remaining half of the payment until we get more information on the SEPT plan, which is basically money that would be restricted for payment against pension. And so effectively we're putting it against that liability, but it's just a different investment mechanism for the agency.
Okay. I don't know if you remember, if it was last year or the year before, I did bring SEPT information or discuss it as it was first coming out. It's similar to SERPT for the OPEB, but it's for your pension. Now, I don't know what the rates are, the return rate. I know that this money we're investing is somewhere a return of 7%, which is high. And I think that's what caused the board to make the decision to make this investment in the first place. But if that is board direction, we can do that.
I just look at, it's costing us 7%. We're only getting 1.5% with our money. By taking this aggressive approach and paying it down, the savings are so substantial.
Blaine, I don't disagree that we should make contributions towards our pension liability. I'm just talking about a slightly more integrated approach instead of putting all of our eggs into the PERS basket, which is, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just a high risk. The SEPT program, I think, has two different strategies that you can subscribe to. Their projected returns are slightly less than the PERS returns, but the volatility is a little bit less as well. It just gives the agency, more options. And again, like I said, I'm always one who's, likes moderation and not putting all my eggs in one basket. And so my motion isn't to reduce the amount that we put against our pension liability. It's to, at this point, direct staff to invest half of that ADP amount into SERP after July 1 and reserve the other half possibly for an additional payment into the directly into CalPERS, but to come back to the board and with information on this SEPT program, which I know a bunch of the local agencies have also started to utilize in their addressing their pension liabilities.
So, Blake, I got to ask you, this SEPT investment pool that you're talking about, putting half the money into, does it pay better than the 7% liability that we're facing with the UAL interest issue?
It's never that simple. They say that you're saving the 7% that they're charging on our UAL, but you're really putting money into a fund. If this year, for instance, when CalPERS had a tough year, Dale, I guess my answer is it's more complex than that. I'm not really ready to try and give firm numbers on it. I know that the SEPT program, I think their strategy one, they project a return of somewhere between 5 and 6%, but their volatility is much less than the PERS 7% has a higher volatility. So you're not guaranteed, basically you're not guaranteed that 7% when we put this in. And Rochelle mentioned that both in the budget in here that, depending on how CalPERS performs, these numbers, end up fluctuating substantially. And so again, I think a $1.3 million contribution, I'm just one board member, but a $1.3 million contribution, additional discretionary payment to our pension UAL is a good step forward with, again, I think the option of coming back to the board with information on the SEP program so we can educate ourselves on that and potentially put additional money there or not, and put the additional 1.3 back into PERS. That's just my one vote, my one opinion.
Okay, anyone else? Dan?
Does staff have a opinion on that? Whether that's a good way to go or not?
Go ahead, Maroon.
I think because not all the board directors are up to speed with the SEP program, I think we should take the recommendation of Blake. We can do the half of the additional discretionary payment, come back in a few months, give an explanation of it, give more detail, and then the board can determine. And then waiting a few months isn't going to be that critical in the whole process. So I think the best if everybody was comfortable with the process, because we'd like to implement next year, maybe that is the best approach.
Okay, I'll amend the motion that we do half of it right now. And maybe next month we can get educated on the SERP program so we can then make that choice, okay? That's my motion. I'll amend that motion.
Okay, let me revise that total just so I can make that verbal and give you an amount. We had 35,532 divided by 2. That is, we are going to make the ADP now to CalPERS for $1,117,766. I could just make that an even number. We can say 1,315,000.
That's fine.
Okay, I'll do 1,315,000 for an ADP to CalPERS plus the regular annual payment of 981,445.
And come back next month so we can get educated on give us some details on the SEP program for next
Sure.
month. I don't want to go 2 to 3 months down the road on this. Let's take action.
We can do that. Definitely. So we had a motion from Director Lewis and a second from Northrop.
Okay. Motion and a second with no further discussion. All in favor, roll call, please.
Van Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrop,
Yes.
Blake Tresman,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Move on. All right, the next item is item number 9. Approval of Resolution 6-2020, establishing temporary commercial sewer rate relief program in response to COVID-19 pandemic and related economic impacts. Discussion.
So I'm coming back to you after previous discussion for the COVID relief for commercial customers. And previously, we discussed this, and we were given direction that there would be no cash payment or check given to commercial customers. So I have worked with staff, and we have created a way to give a credit on bills for customers, whether they are direct bill biannually or they are annual bill to the tax roll. We can make that happen. And in addition to receiving this credit on their invoices, they will also receive letters notifying them that they have been given a relief. We will also be able to go customer by customer, so that if their account is delinquent as of July 1st, they will not receive relief. And it is equivalent, the relief is equivalent to 1.5 months of service for a total plus or minus, give or take $372,353 based on the business factors of these commercial accounts times their monthly rates times their annual or biannual rate. That's what the figures come down to. So as we go through these customers, we'll weed out which are governmental, which are public utilities, and this number will come down. So we're in the process of doing that now, and we have it all lined up, and it's been very busy. So do you have any questions? Go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, just a comment. So I think at the Taos City PUD, what we did was for the months, basically, we kind of looked at it as business activity being significantly interrupted for a 3-month time period, which is like mid-March through now mid-June, with business activity being reinstated. So what we did there is we did a 50% reduction for those 3 months. I think the way the math works on this, it would be that same 50% reduction over 3 months is the same as a 12.5% reduction over the course of the year. So, so anyway, I'm supportive of this.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Lane.
I'm going to abstain from discussion here.
Okay, Blake?
Rochelle, could you just, we call it all commercial customers, but then you say that we're going to not send it out to commercial customers that are public agencies. What about, apartments and, residential units? Are those considered, multifamily residential units? Are those considered under this quantity? Or will those be weeded out also, or were they already weeded out as part of this?
They are weeded out. Those are considered residential.
What about the
Okay.
customers that have not closed, like grocery stores, gas stations, etc.?
Those are commercial. They are commercial. They would be considered for relief.
That's funny.
Okay, Blake?
I guess, just further comment, I know that a number of the other agencies have taken various measures to provide some relief to the community based on the economic consequences of COVID. And some agencies took similar action to what we're proposing here of a blanket percentage to a certain customer class, whereas others have provided relief on an as-needed basis, requiring applications. And I know that there was a concern on the effort that would be placed on staff, but just in talking with the agencies that did that approach, who sent out notifications to their customers and then waited for responses, that the amount of response has been kind of underwhelming. And so I guess I question, one, the need of all these customers. I question I know that this is the most expeditious way for the agency to provide relief, but I think it ends up providing relief to a number of people that have really no need. In fact, they're perhaps have essential services they provide and stayed open and maybe even did better economically through the COVID crisis than they would have otherwise, yet they're going to get relief. Plus, we talked about this last month about the fact that many of the commercial customers don't own the properties they operate out of, and that this economic relief is going to go to the landlords, and there's no guarantee that this money's going to be distributed actually to the folks who have seen the negative impacts of the COVID epidemic. And so, yeah, just not crazy about, I know it's an easy way to do it. We're trying to make a positive impact, and I like that concept. I just think the method ends up, taking quite a bit of money, almost potentially $400,000 of agency money that hasn't seen any reduction in costs, and just distribute it. So I have my concerns over, addressing this problem in this way. Dan, I know you were the, kind of the architect of this, and you still feel like this is an appropriate move for the agency?
I do. I think it shows that we're paying attention to what's going on around us, and recognizes that there was this significant business interruption. It's not perfect, but I think it's close enough. I think there will be some businesses will get a little bit of a windfall out of this, that we're able to stay open, but I think the effort of trying to dissect it is probably not worth it.
My question was, why would the ones that are essential services, like gas stations and supermarkets, get that benefit?
It's all inclusive for commercial businesses. So we can't exclude them as a commercial property.
Yeah, that's the imperfect part about it.
Well, when we spoke about this last time, that was one of the issues, is that it would be difficult for the agency to police, to be the determining factor on which commercial property stayed open, was able to generate revenue. So the cleanest way was to treat all of them equally, which would mean that they would all receive credit. And plus our level of detail to define which commercial properties are gas stations, which ones are retail specific to being open during COVID. We just do not have that ability, and it would require a lot of effort by staff. And if we were to audit it now, we wouldn't know if they were open at that time anyway. So it sounds like it really comes down to a factor of, does the agency want to provide a credit, and how they want to implement that. So it really comes down to or an application process where we ask people to reach out to us. That's how I'm interpreting the conversation right now.
Right. Dale, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to chime in here. You know, I think that providing relief is a good gesture on behalf of the agency, but we have to sit back as a board and realize that our expenses continue on just the way they have all the time. And for us to sit back and provide a $400,000 benefit and have a situation where I think we're opening up a real Pandora's box as far as who gets the money, how they get it, whether or not the landowner will pass those savings down to a leasee. I mean, this can get very, very confusing and very complicated. And I don't really like to see our staff get involved in that kind of controversy. You know, if we were seeing some kind of a reduction in our cost of operation to provide service, I could see that a credit and some kind of compensation to our commercial people would be in order. But I don't see where this agency is benefiting or having any kind of cost reduction in our way of operations in lieu of this pandemic. And I think that we really should keep our operation business as usual. And if somebody comes to us and asks us for relief, we should consider it. But to sit back and get involved in this type of situation, I think we're really not addressing the way we do our business properly.
LaRue, how much?
Good, go ahead, Blake.
LaRue, how many requests has the agency seen from the customer base for relief on their sewer bills?
If I recall correctly, I think it's total of 3. We've had one request as it pertained to connection fees, but that doesn't count. So yeah, it's definitely minimal without question.
And I'd like to counsel Richard, in lieu of how this is coming down and how this is being presented to the agency, could this in any way be considered, if we do give relief to the people on request, would this be considered a gift of public funds?
No, Dale, neither of the proposed options would be a gift of public funds, and the proposed resolution that's before you goes into some detail explaining the background and rationale for doing this, in large part in an effort to demonstrate that this is not a gift of public funds. If the agency shifted to a case-by-case approach of having to demonstrate actual hardship, that type of program also could be structured so as to not be a gift to public funds.
Okay, thank you.
What about churches and schools? Are they considered commercial?
I think under the resolution, schools would not be subject to this. Churches, I believe so. I'd have to reread the resolution clearer. One more time, John.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't be supportive of a case by case thing. I recognize that, 400,000 is a lot of money, or just shy of that. I still think that I think TTSA sometimes has a reputation of being out of touch with the community. And I think this would be a way of creating some positive press for TTSA, that we are in touch with the community, that we're paying attention to what's going on in the broader community, and that we recognize that the broader business community in our customer base was severely impacted in these last 3 months. And I'm, the fact that we've only had a small 3 folks approaching us for some form of rate relief, I think most folks are like, they're not even thinking they should bother, because, government and utility providers are generally not proactive at doing these kinds of things. And I think we should be. So that's my opinion. But
So
I got, I have to sit back and disagree on Dan. I don't think we're out of touch as an agency with what's going on with this community at all. If anything, I think we're on top of what's going on in this community as far as for wastewater treatment and doing our job. And I just think we've got to be very cautious in the feedback and the negative feedback that we could get from providing $400,000 to relief. And not everybody is going to get this kind of relief. And I just think that we're entering into a situation that could come back to haunt us in a negative way, and I think we ought to avoid it. Our cost of operations continue day by day, unchanged. And for us to take this step, I think is taking a risk of some negative feedback from the taxpayers. And yes, it would be a kind gesture. It would be a nice thing to do. But our costs continue to go on as normal. And I think that we're looking at a situation that could come back to haunt us.
Rochelle, I don't know whether you've gotten any public comment on this item. Anybody in the audience who's listening, this is agendized to the public, whether there's any feedback we can get from our constituents.
We have not.
Nothing?
We have not received any public comment unless there are any of our guests. There's 3 guests on the line right now, if any of them have any comments to make on the subject. Otherwise, I have received.
okay, so I think I know how this is going to go, because my understanding is, since Lane is conflicted out, that it would require 3 affirmative votes to advance the item. And so just to move this along, I'm going to move that we approve resolution 6-2020, establishing the temporary commercial sewer rate relief program. And I'll just throw it out there and see if there's a second or not.
I'll second.
Okay,
Okay, all in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
No.
Lane Lewis,
Abstain.
President Cox.
No.
Okay, we have 2 yes votes, 2 no votes, or well, 1.5 yes votes, 1.5 no votes, and 1 abstain. So we have a tie.
The resolution fails because it needs a majority.
Yes.
Right.
Okay,
So the motion is not approved. Motion.
And I just want to reiterate that I like the sentiment. I feel bad for the commercial customers that were impacted. I just don't approve of the process that we developed and that's being was under the proposed resolution.
If I may, because of your vote and that statement, would you like the board to come back, staff to come back with an alternative option, meaning a process? Or would this be the completion of the,
close the door.
or would this be finalization of having a credit?
I recommend just close the door.
I think
Yeah, I think we spent enough time on this. If there isn't a majority support of the board, it's not there and we should just move on.
I think you'll see some small businesses going out of business because of this, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, let's move along to item 10. Approval negotiated contract for procurement of liquid oxygen.
I'll make the motion to approve that.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Second. No further discussion. All in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item 11, approval of change order number 1 to rebuild the what is that? Center
Centrisis?
rotating assembly and let's get her done.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor to approve item 11. Any further discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item 12, repair. Everyone has had a chance to review this agenda item. And is there any discussion? Seeing none and hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve item number 12.
Move approval.
Moved by Wilkins,
Second.
seconded by Lewis. No further discussion or discussion? All in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox. President
Yes.
Cox. Motion.
Okay, item 13, approval to advertise the administrative building remodel project. Discussion. Seeing none, hearing none.
I had one, Dale.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was hoping LaRue could give us a brief description of the purpose of the project.
Sure. Before I do that, if I can just want to revisit, I know we closed it. Were there any questions to the roof repair project? We went through that relatively quickly, and it's a large sum. I just want to make sure the board was comfortable with the write-up before I address the next item. I apologize. Or no, I'll move on.
It was a large change order, larger than the original sum, $500,000 without any public bidding process. I think sounds like they're a good contractor. We competitively bid before they won. I guess, Dick, there's no issues with, just change ordering something of that magnitude. That doesn't fall under any public contracting code issues. I mean,
It's a good question. I looked at that when I reviewed the agenda packet. It is a substantial change order. There's no black and white rule at what point it becomes too much. But I thought agency staff did a good job explaining the unusual circumstances that led to the proposed change order. That coupled with your relatively short construction seasons up there, I think there's enough rationale to support the proposed, now approved change order.
yeah, I think the emergency nature of it, the critical equipment that lies beneath the roofs that are showing signs of failure, and the experience the agency has had in the past with leaky roofs and operating under tarps really drove my decision. So.
Thank you for entertaining that. I just want to make sure we jump. Getting back to your comment, Dan, essentially, this is a project to upgrade the interiors of our administrative office to include tile work, carpeting work. As you know, this is an older facility. There's been comments on the appearance from board of directors and staff and individuals that came. Use the front office as a test of how we thought this renovation would look. It seemed to be received well, so this was the next step. We are kind of calling these one, essentially because there are other components that we need to do, such as bathrooms, rooms, and laboratories. So what we want to do is to address this, update the boardroom, make it more appealing. And that's the scope of work for this project. If I've missed anything, Jay, please feel free to correct me or add on to that.
No, I think you got most of that. The one additional item I'd add is for the boardroom improvements that we intend on not only new paint and new furniture in the boardroom, but also new window coverings and new furniture.
I got a question with regards to this. In the boardroom, if we can leverage the video technology that's present, as some directors aren't able to attend the meeting, that we can really look into the new video technology that is available. So our directors that aren't present will be could still chime in at the same without being there.
Yeah, so the IT improvements, the video audio improvements, and then anything associated with basically the microphones and speakers and everything, that won't be done by the contractor. That's done by our in-house staff. So Bob, I don't know if you can address that aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, I guess that would be put in under the normal O&M budget.
Okay, I just want to say that we, through that, you know, it's part of the process in the meeting room, just so, you know, our information is easily transmitted to the outside public on these meetings with the video and of each director. And if a director is not there, that he could still be teleconferenced in or videoed in and have that ability to respond to comments.
Dan?
I agree with Lane's comments. I think if directors can participate via video conference, I think that's a good thing. And then I think also having the technology for the live streaming of our board meetings and recording of them, I think is a good thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I think Blake.
Anybody else? Blake?
My only comment, and I think I had mentioned this when we'd first shown the design, is I question the need for a permanent board dais that, you know, breaks the room up permanently. We're only in there once a month for a few hours, and, you know, the ability to simply roll tables over there and have possibly some, you know, in the floor access to power and whatnot that we might need as a board would give the room a lot more flexibility. And so it looks like it's a built-in cabinet style table, which seems, you know, possibly expensive and, you know, limits the flexibility of that space for the agency. And so I would consider eliminating that and simply getting rolling portable tables and chairs for the board dais. There should be stuff that you could access that would.
Yeah, and we didn't want to minimize the table for the board, the directors, and just in terms of us not wanting to minimize your role, you know, in the agency. But we really are doing this project at the will of the board. So if the board directors feel otherwise, that they'd prefer some other type of furniture, we're all ears.
I agree with Blake.
That was brought up. You are correct, Blake, in the concern with being able to make it mobile, put wheels on it so we can move it. So it was addressed to me. I did ask that we kind of moved away and had more of a formal structure. But if the board is open to having foldable tables that we could put away every day, we could proceed down that path.
Can we use the same desks that we have now for our board meetings and just move them to a better spot in the room?
The issue with the current desk is that it's a curved piece of furniture, which doesn't work well in the new rotated arrangement. And then we also had a layout where we had an option for a 6th chair, so that option would go away as well.
Yeah, I agree with Blake that, you know, setting the room up so that it's got maximum flexibility for being used in multiple ways makes sense. You know, it's having tables with modesty panels in front of them as the dais, I think is fine. I don't think we need to be perched up in something more austere than that. I think we accomplish the same business whether we're making the room less useful or not. So I think we're fine I'm fine with Blake's suggestion.
On that note, the recommendation that would be or the action that would be to approve the advertisement of the 2020 Administrative Building Remodel Project with an amendment to the Board of Directors desk. That's acceptable, then we will proceed with that action and we'll leave it up to staff to amend the plans accordingly, and then we'll continue to advertise.
Need a motion?
I'll so move.
Been moved by Northrop,
I'll second.
seconded by Lewis.
Tresson.
Blake, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Blake,
Got it.
all in favor? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
You want to take a little break?
We have.
One more.
Adjourn for, we still have the department reports. If you want to adjourn for a few minutes, that's up to you.
Now let's keep plowing. Is everybody okay with that?
We're okay.
Okay, let's talk about management reports.
Well, actually, if we could do,
Oh, there's one more.
discussion of the solar power project.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Item 14, discussion of solar power project.
Yeah, good morning, directors. Again, Jay Parker, engineering manager. So over the past few months, the staff has been in contact with 2 solar vendors, REC Solar and EDF Renewables, to investigate 2 potential options: a power purchase agreement, an outright cash purchase of solar panels. And this was kind of a feasibility level study to see, is this something that we should be pursuing further? So we didn't get super detailed with analysis, but we did enough just to give us kind of an idea as to what the metrics look like. Basically we gave them the same conditions, the same assumptions, these 2 competing vendors, and asked them to come up with these studies. What was found is that couple drawbacks, and then there's a recent update that I need to give you, but the drawback is that under net metering 2.0, that we're limited in terms of what kind of size of a system that we can install here at TTSA. Under what they're calling NEM 2.0, we are limited to 1 megawatt of power. And when you look at an overall demand for TTSA, basically that means that solar panel array can only offset about 40% of our power usage. 60% of the usage would still need to come from the utility. There was a question early on, and I guess it's still a little bit of a question. What we've heard from other solar power users is that they are oftentimes assessed a standby charge from the utility. And that's often a drawback in terms of what you're able to save. So the initial information was indicating that there might be some kind of standby charge from the utility. We did get a late phone call after this report went out late last week that TDPUD does not levy standby charges. We would certainly want to get that in writing if we were to pursue this. But basically, you have these 2 options. You have the cash purchase. You have the power purchase agreement option. And what you end up with is in the turnkey purchase, you end up buying the solar panels, and then over a certain payback period, and in this case, it's 8 to 11 years. Basically, we would pay back what it costs for us to purchase in our savings. But at the end of the life cycle, that the panels are ours. And the concern on that aspect of it is that the technology changes quickly, and at the end of the life cycle of 20 years here, or even just 8 to 11 years, that technology can change. And so that's the disadvantage of outright purchase, is that you end up with maybe antiquated technology. The other option is a power purchase agreement, in which we would basically have a company come in, they install the panels. Those panels are not considered ours as owner, they're their panels. And we end up with a reduction in power rate from 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what our provider gives us, to 7 to 8 cents of equivalent power cost. And so, but the same caveat applies, is that we're only really getting that reduced rate for 40% of our load. The 60% of the load would still be through the PUD at the market rate. So basically, I gave you guys a bunch of presentation material, which covers more details, and I'm happy to delve into any of the details that any of directors would want to look at. But at this point, what we're looking at is kind of a go, no go decision in terms of, do we want to include further analyses or even just elect to go with one of these options so that we can budget it appropriately and put it in the master plan. So at this point, I'd like to open up the discussion to the directors.
It seems like we're you know, with that surcharge in electricity, standby power. I mean, they could change that at any time and make the whole analysis obsolete. Is that correct, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, there would be, if we would want to go into something like this, I would expect that we would be developing contracts that outline what the understandings are on charges. But Dick, I don't know if you have any advice on, are those agreements just worth the paper they're written on, or would we be able to hold our utility accountable for any provisions?
No, I think it's a risk to these types of transactions that you will continue to be at the subject to whatever future rate structure the local public utility district may adopt in years or decades to come. And they will, as you do, they will regularly be evaluating and reevaluating the rate structure.
So if their rates go down, our payback goes down. If their rates go up, our payback goes up. And then
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Jay, was the payback periods, which seem pretty favorable, were they based on an escalating energy charge from PUD, or just based on a flat 10 cents a kilowatt hour going forward?
Yeah, Blake, I'd have to look at that in more detail, but I believe when I was asking pointed questions, especially to EDF about what they assumed on their power rates, it was 10 cents across their entire analysis. So I know for EDF, they assumed that constant 10 cents. And looking at the numbers, REC and EDF had very comparable proposals. So I would anticipate that if we asked Duke that question, they would also assume that constant 10.
So, I mean, it seems like a project like this has two elements to it. One is it's, financial benefits to the agency, and the second one is sort of a green environmental approach. From a finance standpoint, the payback periods on the cash purchase are pretty good. The technology is pretty proven. I'm not too concerned about, this thing turning upside down. On the green side, it's a good thing also, but it's, I think that if I'm not mistaken, the Truckee Donner PUD portfolio is already somewhere between 60 and 80% renewable as it is. So we're displacing 40% of their power with power we're producing, but 60 to 80% of that power is already renewable. I guess, LaRue, a recommendation that I might have in terms of direction would be to perhaps bring a representative from Truckee Donner PUD to TSD also and share their perspective. It's a pretty large project. My understanding is that while it could benefit TTSA directly, it may have a negative impact on the Truckee Donner PUD customer base, and understanding that, I think, would be important for us to know before we made any kind of definitive motion.
Yeah, so Blake, oh, sorry.
I'd like to ask Jay a question real quickly. We've been kicking this issue of solar around for a number of years now, maybe 10 or 12 or maybe even more for that matter. And one of the drawbacks on moving forward with dealing with solar has been revolved around the storage capabilities of the solar technology. Has in the recent years the storage capabilities improved to the point where it's starting to become a little bit more feasible for the agency to engage in solar?
Yeah, so to address Dale's question first, on the storage aspect, we had our vendors look into what it would take and what it would mean to store power through batteries or the like, and be able to either backfeed and supply power to the utility versus using that stored power and supplying our facility. And what the consistent reaction from both our vendors was that the economics just don't pan out for those battery system for us. There's all kinds of incentive programs right now, you know, for battery storage. We don't qualify for those because a lot of the wholesale power comes from Nevada, which kind of disqualifies us from the California programs. So from a perspective of rebates or, you know, making the battery systems feasible, that just kind of fell out and did not pan out. To address Blake's concern, we did meet with the PUD back in February, and it was a good meeting. It lasted a while. A couple of representatives came. We walked through the details of what it would mean for TTSA to go solar. They were also explaining what Blake, you explained, and that is the PUD already has been greening their portfolio significantly. They're buying more and more renewable power, you know, every year. So in terms of like us, TTSA being green, you know, we are getting some secondary benefits from our utility having greened up. And so then, you know, there's like, okay, what additional value, how much is it worth it to the directors to pay more to get more green? So there's that issue. And then with respect to the impact to the other commercial entities through town, they did admit that with TTSA going to, and I think this was when we were going to 100% power, solar power, and with no metering back, and which we can't do anymore, but that there was going to be a pretty big impact to the other commercial properties in Truckee because we are a huge customer for them, and there are potential ramifications with respect to maintenance and upkeep and operations of their facility. If we went to a 40% level or 60%, you know, from their side, you know, I'd have to ask them again, is there going to be would there be a commercial impact to the rest of the community? But there definitely was that discussion, and there were some concerns on the district's side.
Okay. What do you want to do?
Would you, I'm sorry, Dan, did you turn on?
Yeah. So, I mean, it looks surprisingly positive from an economic standpoint. You know, it looks like if we were to pursue it, we put, you know, the first 10 years, you know, we put the system in, we pay it back over approximately 10 years. And then after that, we see reduced operating costs for the remaining life of the system in the form of reduced electricity charges. So it seems to make sense from an economic standpoint, unless there's something I'm missing in this whole conversation. Is there anything I'm missing, Jay or LaRue?
I mean, no, you're seeing the metrics in front of you in terms of payback period. So it's, it does have the ability to offset some of our power costs. It's not, it's 40% of our power costs. I guess the caution is that, the metrics could change on us depending on what, future policies roll out, or, laws or regulations, district policies, et cetera.
Do we know what that translates to in terms of annual operating cost? 40, did we spend 200,000 on electricity last year, or more or less?
Yeah, so there's basically two options. There's the cash purchase, and then there's the power purchase agreement. In the cash purchase agreement, you have a year one net savings of basically $200,000 to $300,000. And then the power purchase agreement, you have somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $70,000 savings in the first year. So there's an immediate savings on each of these options. It's just a matter of, do we want to be owning the panels, or do we not want to own the panels and have somebody else responsible for them? Either way, O&M responsibility is on them, but it's a matter of ultimate ownership.
Seems to me that we would need to get some contractual agreements with the utility district, because the standby charges could throw a big wrench in the whole cost benefit savings. Seems like we need to do a little bit more research here as far as getting a commitment from the utility district. I don't know whether the utility district, the PUC could come under this, or the state legislature could also throw a wrench in it.
I have a question.
So,
What if we were to lease them, would they update them when the systems become more efficient in the future, or would we be stuck with that?
Well, that's a good point. In terms of, they did indicate, both of them, that under the power purchase agreement, that if things end up failing, they're ultimately responsible for providing a certain agreed power rate under the purchase power agreement. And if their equipment fails, or there's a more efficient way of doing things, that they could potentially come in and make some changes, because it's their system. So I'd say there is a slight advantage on the power purchase agreement in terms of having this be a system that they can evolve themselves.
Chairman. The intent of the item was just to kind of inform the board of what was done, make a determination of how, if we wanted to proceed, and provide some options on how to proceed on that one. The biggest thing was, the idea was initially, I think a lot of people were under the impression that we had the ability to size this as to fulfill all of our needs. After the research from Jay, we found out that there are limitations, so we're bringing that to you. We provided some information on how it could be beneficial to us in payback terms, whether it be we purchase it outright or do a PPA. We're definitely going to need more research and more information to get into contracts. But the idea was to find out if there is an interest to proceed before we start investing a lot of staff time and consultant time into this. And it sounds like there is some interest, and if that's the case, we will proceed to come back with reaching out to the local power authority, then getting more information there and getting more details. It's just, again, I didn't want to waste, I'd rather better utilize our time and company time from these consultants. So the way I'm interpreting is we should proceed with more information, and we could return next month or whenever it's feasible for the local power company to have a little bit of a informative session there. And we can reach out and continue working with the solar companies to see what other options that they can provide to us. Does that sound like a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Any other questions or comments? It appears that this is an action item. We're just directing staff. Go ahead, Blake.
Here's the numbers guy again. You probably have all driven by TSD, where we put in a solar system, a fairly large solar system there. that cost us $1 million, and it was just, my numbers are right, about 1/15 of the size that we're proposing at TTSA, but the cost is, barely a multiplier of 2. And so I don't know whether these are, I know that they both gave you roughly the same numbers, but it's surprising how cheap, inexpensive compared to our system, you're getting a quote size of the system. But just something else. I like, LaRue, your direction. I absolutely agree. I think we live in a place with great solar potential, and I'd like to see the project move forward. But just a warning, I wonder about those capital costs that they've given the cost of our system.
Their next step for both of them to take further, basically they're looking at, it'd be an RFP process where they're competitively bidding for a price in which we'd have contract terms associated with those. So what they've given us on these costs are feasibility level costs. They're not what they consider to be their bid costs. And, when you throw in all the caveats for what we would want for contracting, then potentially prices could change.
So we need a motion to go ahead with the study of the feasibility?
No, John, I have direction. I will reach out, or Jay will reach out and to our local power authority and do further research with the current companies for solar power. Thank you very much. With that, we could move on to the next item.
Okay, with that being said, let's move on to the management team reports. Let's start out with Mike.
Good morning, President Cox, Board of Directors. The operations, this Michael Peak, Operations Department Manager. The operations report for the month of May. All plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. Overall, the plant performed well through the month. We just did budget preparations for fiscal year 2020-2021. We facilitated plant equipment and process systems in and out of service to assist with the painting project that we have going with engineering and maintenance. COVID-19 scheduling, mitigation, planning, implementation. Laboratory staff perform necessary laboratory testing per WDR requirements and operational needs. Work orders. You can see plant data for the monthly average flow, 3.16 MGD, and the limits, the WDR monthly limits were met. As per last month, there was a request to every year when we do chemicals to do a projected chemical cost change for the fiscal year. So I've provided that on the next sheet for fiscal year 2020-2021. You can see the 5 chemicals that we went out to bid for and procured quotes for, that it looks like about an increase about 6.4% overall for those chemicals based on projected usage. And then of course the trend analysis that follow that. Any questions on any of those items?
Negative.
Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing none, hearing none. Next up would be Richard. What's up?
Morning, President Cox and Board of Directors. Pretty straightforward month for maintenance. Continuing to dedicate a fair amount of staff resources to the painting project. We did knock out 6 small in-house projects over the last month, as well as maintaining the PM list, as well as a few critical repairs for operations. But overall, pretty straightforward and uneventful. Any questions?
Seeing none, hearing none. What's up, Dave?
So in the month of May, engineering staff continued to work on digital scanning of sewer lines. That just went out to bid. You'll be seeing results of that next month. Headworks Improvements Project, we're getting our bid ready set together to go out to bid this early this fall. Master Sewer Plan, that's ongoing. We're working with Corollo to review projects and prioritize projects. 2019 roof repair project, that was the subject of an earlier discussion. 2020 plant painting project, in which we're painting several facilities around the plant. 2020 court and wall additions project, where we received no bids, but we'll be going out and negotiating for proposals for contractors. And 2020 admin building remodel project, which is being advertised for bid. Engineering work orders and safety work orders are reported there. You got some photographs. Any questions?
Any questions for Jay? Seeing none, hearing none. What's up there, Bob Gray? Better turn your sound on. There
Thank
you
you. Okay.
There you
Good morning, members of the board. The IT department has been maintaining a regular schedule remotely, coming into the plant when necessary. In May, we were notified by our cloud services provider that they will be shuttering their doors at the end of the month. We've been focused on getting all of our services onto TTSA's on-site servers, hopefully with little to no disruption at all. The first phase of the safety permit web portal has been in full operation now for 6 weeks. And we have now started the process of migrating over the electrical safety permits to that system. We've also been focused on getting the electronic logbook migrated to the plant information system as its own web portal. We will start testing this portal towards the end of June. And here at the plant, we've replaced a critical IO module in our BNR influent pump station that was compromised due to a rodent infestation. And lastly, I've been in contact with Vicki from Human Resources to restart the process of hiring one additional IT specialist. That's about it. Any questions?
Any questions?
I got a question, Bob. With regards to the flow meters, how often do you test the accuracy of like the flow meter up on Dollar or Ramparts or throughout the system?
That would be more of a question directed towards our E&I department. Maybe if Richard, you can speak on that.
Sure. We test them twice a year.
Okay. But you're getting the reading material, you're getting the reads in the plant, correct?
Yes.
Everybody?
Yeah, the readings are continuous, and we calibrate them twice a year to make sure they're accurate.
Okay, thanks. No further questions.
Okay, let's move on to general manager's report.
Just to add just a few things, I do expect next month to also have our board meeting through teleconference. So please plan for that accordingly. I just wanted to send some acknowledgments and let everybody know that I thank them for their work on the budgets. We've had a lot of transitions going over from software to software, putting the data together, evaluating the data, making projections. It's very easy to review it. I just want to let you know there's a lot of work behind there, and I appreciate all the managers stepping up, providing all the data, reaching out to their staff, and getting all that necessary. And one of the biggest things that I really want to point out additionally is the safety. Safety is a big thing with me. It always has been. Through past months, we've been pushing and making sure that we're giving everybody the time to get all their safety trainings in order. And quite frankly, everybody's doing a great job. And been able to be here, they're up to speed, and I think that's just something that's commendable. It says a lot about how the agency cares about their staff and how we work forward to it. So to me, it's a big deal. I just want to let you guys know that the staff and management have done a great job with safety. So other than that, I have nothing additional to report for the general manager report, and I can take any questions if I are any.
Any questions for LaRue? Anybody? Go ahead, Blake.
We forgot Rochelle.
What about Rochelle? Oh, Rochelle, I'm so sorry.
I guess you figured I did enough talking. You didn't want to hear me anymore.
Well, that budget, you looked exhausted after the budget. Thought I'd
You
give
know,
you a break.
I was exhausted last week.
Yeah, so was I.
Really, I did pretty much, you heard everything I had to say. All of the topics that I discussed today is all the work put into them was done over the last month. So accounting has helped prepare the budgets. We participated in meetings and discussions regarding the funds, and done a lot of work that you're going to see coming up next month as well. Really, we're also preparing for tax roll billing, delinquencies. We did a lot of work for the COVID, but that's okay too. So moving forward, we're going to finalize these budgets. We're going to do make that one correction to the table, finalize those and move forward. We'll come back with the UAL. I have direction on that. And looking forward to, you know, making those improvements and, you know, taking it to the next level. So thank you for your time and your support and, you know, the constructive criticism and feedback that I get from everyone just helps make me do my job better. So I appreciate it and thank you very much.
And I want to thank you, Rochelle, for doing such a great job on producing the numbers and all the things that you've done in regards to the budget. I know that Blake put on his spectacles and got out his magnifying glass and checked up on you through the finest of detail. And I want to thank you for having your numbers in order and standing there. Making sure that we're running it tight and right.
Somebody's got to do it.
It's a dirty job, but it's got to be done.
Yeah,
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
And I apologize for skipping over you.
That's okay.
Okay, what about the board of directors? You got any comments there, Lane?
Comments, just outstanding job on the budget. That's such a huge job. And for you to take that on, Rochelle, and get and pull that all together, phenomenal job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank
for
you.
all that
What
you
about
do.
you, Dan? Thumbs up, no comment? What about Blake, anything?
I was curious if we had received any public comment directed to the staff in response to the articles in the Moonshine Inc.
I have not received any directly. I'm not sure if LaRue did or not. I'm aware of.
Thank you.
No, I've not received any.
Okay, Johnny, anything, any comment?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I got one comment, and it's nothing really of any importance to a lot of people, but it is to me, and that is, LaRue mentioned that we're subbing out our landscaping and lawn care.
We are.
I would like to make a recommendation to our general manager to have whoever we're contracting our lawn care to step it up, because our lawn in our approach to this office and this facility is, I think it could be taken up another level. There's no flowers in the beds. It's summertime. Curb appeal, to me, is very important. It sends a message to the public that does take an opportunity to come over here for whatever reason, that we take pride in our facility and we take pride in our grounds and our agency. So I'd like to make a recommendation to the general manager to have whoever we have contracted to take care of our lawn, to turn the sprinklers on a little bit more, get that lawn and get that garden looking the way it should be.
Point taken. Yes, we Richard and I have already talked about it, and we are making the same conclusions. We've already taken steps to address that.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Anything else in this open session of this June the 17th, the year 2020 board meeting? Anyone? Anything? I'll ask for a motion to adjourn to closed session.
I'll make that motion to adjourn to closed session.
It's been moved by Lewis,
I'll second.
seconded by Northrup. All in favor, roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
President Cox.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn is approved.
And tape is off.